You're listening to the new media. You're listening to Mitchell Talks. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter at Mitchell Talks. It's always a pleasure to see Kim Moyer with Marsy's Law. It's great to see you.
Hi, Scott. It's good to see you, too.
Tell us what's been going on with your organization, because I know, just looking at the fact sheets that I have, there are tons of people involved, and there are people completely distracted by another issue, State Question 788. If you were back in the news business, it'd be Christmas in July, wouldn't it?
Well, I'll tell you, there is a lot of stuff that's kind of taking up all the oxygen in the room when it comes to politics, but the reality of it is that crime victims around the state know that you can never tell when something bad like that's going to come your direction or impact you or your family. And they also know that, you could wake up one day and your whole world is turned upside down. And so I try to keep them in the front of my mind when I'm thinking through all of this, because the reality is we were doing this because crime victims need the help. And I work with almost 100 crime victims now across the state. Everybody from senior citizens who have had their life savings embezzled from them, all the way up to homicide survivor families that are impacted by crime. So I keep them in the front of my mind, helps clear the distraction out, and keeps us focused.
Well, more than just engaging with these folks, you're also running a campaign. So you're wearing two hats. I mean, you're very involved in this in terms of engagement with these people. You're making friends, and you're getting to know folks, victims of crime, and hearing those stories, and obviously they affect you. There's also the fact that you've got a big issue to pass in front of the voters in November. So there's the business side and the emotional side. How do you do both of them?
So that's the whole point of all of this, is to finding a commonality, finding something about this issue that voters can relate to, so that when they show up on November 6th, that they actually take the time to flip the ballot pages through, because there's going to be multiple pages of it, and go down to where the state questions are and actually take the time to vote on the state questions. So I know that there's a little bit of fatigue out there about issues, so it's my job to keep this issue out there in front, so that when people need to be receptive about crime victims and learn about that as they're preparing to vote, that they have the tools that they need to make a good decision about this. And so far, we're getting a whole lot of good feedback, because we're taking this from so many different approaches to try to find where people live and find where they want to approach this issue, that we're having great nonpartisan support across the board with our really, really strong group of people.
Can we just start at the beginning of why there's Marsy's Law and what's going to happen in Oklahoma? Just give us a recent history lesson about Marsy's Law, why it's on the ballot, what it seeks to do.
Sure. So Oklahoma has a long history of trying to help crime victims. We have had on the books for more than 30 years the Oklahoma Crime Victim Bill of Rights in statute. The people who worked to put that in place are part of the same people that are working with us today, because they know that back 30 years ago, that was the right step to help crime victims at the time. Now we're coming to discover that crime victims deserve a stronger standing in court, a bigger voice when it comes to how the system proceeds when the criminal justice system is trying to do its job. And they also need a better opportunity to be a part of the system. So when you think about it, you don't know how to play a game if you don't know when it's your turn and when you don't know how to get involved. And the criminal justice system is very complicated. And so we're trying to help people understand why we need to have this measure in the Constitution and why we need to take this next step.
All right, give me a civics lesson. The difference between a statute, a law in statute, and one that would be placed into the Constitution.
So the main question we get asked about this is, why do we have to have it in the Constitution? And the main reason why is because the rights that protect people who are accused of a crime, which we fully believe those rights need to be intact. If anything, those rights need to be strengthened, because we're seeing situations across the country where people need to make sure their rights are upheld when they're navigating this really important system. So that applies to people who are accused of a crime, and then also people who are impacted by crime. So what we're trying to do is create a companion pathway for victims. If they're impacted by crime, we want them to have the same level of support, the same level of understanding, and the same pathway forward that is given by constitutional protection to people who are accused of a crime. That's the difference. If we have rights in statute, those rights that are given to people who are accused of a crime that are protected in the Constitution will always supersede any right that's already in statute. So we're trying to level the playing field here and give crime victims an equal opportunity at participation in the system.
And to do that, the voters have to speak, and that's what they're going to be doing in November. One of the issues that makes for interesting dinner conversation, I hear this often, well, the voters knew what they were doing. I'm a little bit suspicious of that. I see people that get elected and go, you knew you were voting for them, but in all seriousness, when you cast a yes for Marsy's law, is it pretty simple to understand?
So when you go to the ballot and everybody goes to vote, they'll only get to see the information that's in the ballot title, which is limited by the state. It's crafted in a way so that it addresses and just touches on the high points. But when you look at the measure itself, we're looking at the lines in the Constitution and how we're actually amending what's in the Constitution already. So that's why we're doing our job right now, is we're trying to give information to people so they can actually do the work to understand it if they choose to do it. Because oftentimes ballot language is so confusing, you don't really know what you're voting for. On the general, basic political surface of it, if I just do nothing but tell people vote yes on State Question 794, then yes, that's my important number one job, because a lot of people don't want to take the time and effort to do it. But there are so many crime victims across the state who do want to understand this, and they do want to understand how it works. And then there's experts out in the field who want to understand what will the next steps be for implementation, and what are we going to do moving forward, and how is this really going to help people. So that's my number one job, is telling people, if all you're going to do is show up at on November 6th, vote yes on State Question 794. If you want to learn more about it, then this is all I do all day long, is help people understand it, walk them through it.
One of the issues that we hear the discussion about, the people knew what was in there, is criminal justice reform issues. How would passing Marsy's law impact that discussion?
So for every person that is in the criminal justice system that's trying to navigate, whether it's the prosecution of it or the punishment phase of it, there is a victim on the other side. And so what we're trying to do is refocus some attention on those components of the whole equation. District attorneys, the District Attorney's Council is one of our strongest supporters. Law enforcement, all of our law enforcement associations, they all agree that they can't do their job effectively or as well if we don't have the voice of the crime victims involved. And they know they should do a better job on that. And so we want to make sure that they have the tools to do that. The more we can get crime victims invested in the criminal justice system, the more justice we're going to see overall. And I fully believe strengthening the criminal justice system overall is going to help everybody impacted, whether you are accused of a crime, whether you've been convicted of a crime, whether you're on the verge of parole, or if you're a crime victim just starting out on this very difficult process. You strengthen the system, there's more justice to go around for everybody. And that's my personal belief on how this will positively impact all facets of the criminal justice system.
Tell us about some of your partners. I mean, you've mentioned the district attorneys, but there are lots of groups and individuals that are partners that have nothing to do with law enforcement, correct?
Absolutely. So I have about 35 or so organizations that have stepped up because they want to have a seat at the table when we're having these discussions, because they are impacted directly by the criminal justice process. So we're talking about everybody from the obvious, the law enforcement organizations, the District Attorney's Council. Then we have our crime victim service providers, which are the strongest voice right now that we're hearing from, because they do advocacy and they try to help crime victims every day. So they see the need for this. So we're talking about the Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, the different child abuse prevention organizations that are out there. We have some nonprofits that are doing some really amazing work out there. The Green Shoe Foundation is a great one up in Edmond. They're small and haven't been heard of much, but what they do is they try to help adult survivors of trauma kind of recenter themselves so they can become more productive. So they're fascinating, and and I'm happy to have them on our group as well. Then you get down to some people that you don't necessarily think about as having an impact, on this issue, and that's the State Medical Association, for example. So the Oklahoma State Medical Association, doctors are tasked every day, if they see evidence of a crime, they have mandatory reporting requirements. If you are an emergency room physician, if you're a nurse and you see a child that's been abused, then you absolutely are required by law to report it. So that makes them an essential component of making sure that people get the help they need when they need it. So they are very interested in this, and they've endorsed us. We've got all kinds of folks, faith leaders across the state, who are the counselors. When, say you're impacted by crime and there's a horrible incident that you're trying to deal with as a family. Usually you'll call your family, but a lot of times the second or third phone call that somebody's going to make is to their pastor or to somebody who leads their faith organization. Faith leaders are very interested in being involved in this. The Tulsa Jewish Federation is one of our strongest supporters up in the Tulsa area because they know that they are on the front line in helping families recover, and they want to make sure that faith components are also fairly represented when we have these discussions, and they're very supportive of what we're trying to do. So it's a really broad, diverse coalition of people, and that's just the organizations that we're working with, domestic violence service providers all the way to political organizations that love to play the politics game. But they know that you have to start someplace when you're developing good policy. We are very, very fortunate. We've got the Young Democrats of Oklahoma and the Young Republicans for Oklahoma both wanting to get involved. So we get great volunteers from both groups, and you'd be shocked at how often they work together on issues, because we all know instinctually that good policy isn't always about pointing out the evil on one side and the good on the other. It's about where we can find this intersectionality. So we're totally excited to have this kind of nonpartisan, great group of people and organizations that are working to help us on State Question 794.
I want to get into the politics in just a minute, but you mentioned some of the groups, the district attorneys. Talk to us about some of the victims that you work with. Those are interesting stories.
So we have 95 crime victims that are so behind what we're doing that they're willing to put their name out there to help us. They're willing to kind of speak out on behalf of this. And it could be something as simple as putting a yard sign in your yard, because a lot of times crime victims just are not really ready to tell their story. On the flip side of it, we have some of the leading outspoken crime voices, crime victim voices in the state. One of our newest crime victim survivors is Shannon Hazen. Her daughter, Kristen Hatfield, was murdered in an unsolved case in Midwest City and went on for years. So it's good. She's one of our newest individuals that signed up. So that's Midwest City. We have the Oklahoma Homicide Survivor Support Group, and Lauren Lehman, who is their president, is doing amazing work with that group, helping them pull together so that they can all support each other and then actually do some kind of groundbreaking work to help crime victims in the state. Sherry Farmer up in Tulsa is one of our leading voices. Her daughter was Lori Farmer, who was murdered in Girl Scout camp 40 years ago. She had to fight a hard battle all by herself, going around back 40 years ago when there really were no support system for crime victims, no internet to do the work. She relied on a network of good people to help her. She went on to help do everything from train OSBI agents on how to respond to crimes that impact families when a child is a victim. So we have just a really amazing kind of group of people. I have a flock of young sexual assault survivors, high school kids, who really want to lend their voice to something because they know that they may not have a whole lot of money to offer, which we don't collect donations, but they feel like that they want to have a voice, and so they want to get involved. So we have a really, really great group of crime victims that and survivors. One really interesting component we're seeing too is that people who have disabilities that are impacted by crime, their family members are very, very concerned about the treatment that people with disabilities receive in the criminal justice system. And so they advocate for this because Marsy's law not only gives the rights to crime victims, but it also gives the rights that we're putting into the Constitution extends those rights to family members and other people who are maybe guardians or peripherally impacted by crime, because those are the people who step up when somebody is too injured, too damaged, too traumatized to fight for themselves. They rely on their family, their friends, and their guardians to help do that battle for them. And so that's why we really thought it was important to include that group as well.
So you're running this campaign, and you've got a background as a journalist. I mean, you've been involved in all kinds of public policy issues over the years. When you got into this, were there any expectations that you walked away from day 2 or day 3 and wow, I didn't know that? Things that you could pass on to people like me?
So my background, short of journalism, which was the bulk of my career, most recently I'd worked with domestic violence victims. So I felt in the day-to-day working with them that I understood how really difficult it was as a domestic violence victim, and the children that come along with that, how hard it is for them to navigate the criminal justice system. And how to do it when they're traumatized and have no resources and feel like there's nobody else out there in the world to help them. So I understood that, and I could really feel their pain as they navigated that. What I was completely unprepared for was that in talking with my new friends at the Oklahoma Homicide Survivors Group, is that there is very little advocacy for people who are victims of homicide and the survivors. So, if you are impacted by a drunk driver, then there is a whole nationwide network of Mothers Against Drunk Drivers where they train advocates and they help. And we have great advocates to help people who navigate that system if you're impacted by drunk driving. There is a really strong, dedicated group of people who advocate on behalf of domestic violence victims around the state. They're trained and certified by the Attorney General's office so that they all are up to speed on what needs to be done around the state to join forces so we can help correct this horrific injustice that we have for domestic violence victims here. But there is no network of advocacy for the family members left behind when somebody is murdered. And I find that kind of shocking that we don't have stronger trained advocacy to help homicide survivors. The Homicide Survivor Support Group does a good job through work through the State Bureau of Investigation, but that's not the same thing as having boots on the ground advocates that are trained and dedicated every day. So that was the big kind of valley in between advocacy that I saw that we're trying to correct by having an overarching network of support for helping people, at least the base level advocacy work to train people and help people understand the roadmap forward from the very minute you become a victim of crime. We need to give people a roadmap, and we need to give them the tools to fight for themselves, because we just do not have an advocacy network that covers all of the crime victims' experiences across the state.
So a lot of people are for you. You understand this issue, but it's also the middle of July. People are distracted. Politically distracted. They're distracted from the medical marijuana issue, as you said, is sucking up all the oxygen in the room. What is the campaign doing right now with this sort of kind of lull between campaigns and summertime, long hot days? What's happening with Marsy's Law campaign right now?
We are 100% focused on helping crime victims and building our coalition, because I think every single day that we talk to board members, that we talk to people in the public, whatever time one of our team members speaks to a Rotary Club or Civitans or a state chamber group or whatever it might be, we're educating everyday voters. So we're giving them the knowledge kind of in the background. We're keeping a place so we can build this coalition. We have to just keep moving forward, even though there's a lot of other things going on. But I'll tell you, what I hear repeatedly is that people are grateful for the opportunity to have us come speak, because it's nonpartisan, because it's not candidates attacking each other. In the typical normal political sphere, they like the idea that we can break up some of this with something that is nonpartisan, that has a lot of support, that people can learn about, that they can feel they can do something about. And so that's why I think we're growing support day by day, minute by minute, is because we are that refreshing change of conversation that needs to be done in between of all of this other work that's going on in the political sphere right now. So you don't want to get tangled up in all of that, but at the same time, because we're nonpartisan, we don't get tangled up in all of that, but we are kind of a refreshing, like, new direction that people can look at. And I am hearing a lot from a lot of groups that they are happy. They're happy to have politicians come in and kind of state their case for why they need to be elected or reelected. At the same time, they love the idea of being able to learn about something like this where they can feel they can make positive change at the ballot box, because this is such a great platform for voices for the crime victims that are out there.
One thing noticeably lacking to me is I haven't seen any groups come out against Marsy's law. It's happened in other states. To your knowledge,
don't start something, Scott.
Yeah, I can't imagine that happening, but it has happened in other states, right?
Sure.
So you're not taking anything for granted. We've
No.
seen some, over the last couple of years, we've seen some state questions. People thought, there's no way that's going to fail, and they failed. So as the fall begins, and we're inside 4 months. In 2 weeks, it'll be a 90-day countdown or something along those lines. You had mentioned you don't take money, but you take engagement. So people hear this for the first time, they go, well, I want to be involved in this. I want to help. What would that consist of?
Sure. So you can, give us a call, go on social media. There's all kinds of ways to find us. We've got a great team of people that field reps around the state that are willing to help people engage in any way that they want. Our social media engagement is through the roof. We're getting a lot of people who are really interested in that. And I think that's because younger demographics are getting more politically vested this day and age. So we're seeing a big surge in political engagement. So that's one way, is that you can read the material, you can post and share, you can comment to us, you can go on our website, and if you just enter in some basic information in there, you'll either be funneled straight to me, because I talk to all of our crime victims and I talk to a lot of our organizations, or you'll be funneled to one of our other team members that can basically help you understand what you can do, from putting signs in your yard all the way up to being a part of a video crew that we're going to need to produce in August and September, so we can get more voices out there. Everybody's been has an opinion on this. There are so many people out there, if they haven't been directly impacted by crime, they know somebody who has. And all of those voices are important. All of them are important. And we're looking to harness as much of that as we possibly can. So that's how you can get involved. And if you want us to come speak to your group, we're getting a lot of requests every single day to come speak, and that's always a great opportunity to educate groups at a time and individuals and answer their questions directly about this. So we're happy to help on all of those fronts. That's what we do every day, all day long. And our crime victims we work with are, super supportive and oftentimes come with us when we're having those conversations. So I don't like to ever go anywhere alone. I always feel like having those voices with me when we're talking about things are important. And so we often have crime victims come with us when we do these presentations.
How's the media reacting? Now, media it's the new shiny thing, right? You've seen this up close, and we observe this. But at the same time, sometimes media only goes about, millimeter deep and hardly even a foot wide. What are some of the things that the media, that would be things we can look at that we do that, oh, I didn't know that type of sort of investigation? What's out there that would be very helpful?
Every crime victim that we have that wants to tell their story, the media is always either already heard their experience, but is looking at how we're framing kind of the new direction that we want to take assistance for crime victims. So that's the majority of the media work that we're seeing right now, is people that are interested in the mechanics of the politics, and that's good from an editorial kind of standpoint, letters to the editor and things, which are all great tools. But mostly we just want to give our victims and survivors that work with us a platform to tell their story and what needs to be done to fix it, and how Marsy's Law and State Question 794 is the right thing to help us improve the system so that crime victims have the tools they need to fight for themselves. And so that's the overriding message, and the media, they seem to resonate with that, because I think that this idea that you can tell the story about a crime that's happened and not just leave it hanging out there like there's bad things in the world, but you never tell good stories about the bad things. Well, this is their opportunity to basically tell a deeper level of a story when it comes to relaying some of the horrible things that happen out there in the world. And so, I get it. I did it for a long time. You tell stories, the news of the day, but we're always looking for opportunities to talk about how do we address these issues and how do we really help people. And the media is very, very interested in helping tell some of those stories. So we're very, very fortunate to have a lot of interest from the media on that side of it.
So as we're inside of 4 months, what do we expect next? When people begin to get busy around state fair time, school goes back in, there will be a different feel to the year, and we start seeing right after the runoff, which is what, the 24th of August?
Yeah, 24, 20. It's that last week in August.
Then things start to change, radically start to change. What can people do to make sure this message doesn't get lost as we get to the TV commercials start firing up, all the party nominations will be set, and here we go. We start that countdown, and we'll see the national media just going berserk because we know what's happening on the national level contest for Senate and for the House. But Oklahoma has tons of 4-year offices up, new governor. We've got statewide, there'll be a bunch of rookie statewide officials. Are the public policy leaders paying attention that are running for office, and some of the ones that are going to be there? For example, the House is going to be, they were young guys and gals a couple of 3 years ago. Now they're going to be the senior, right, even over the Senate and the governor's office. Are public policy makers running for office embracing this concept?
Absolutely. So we're really, really fortunate. When we ran Marsy's law to get it on the ballot in the first place, it was Senate Joint Resolution 46 back 2 sessions ago. It was passed by 88-0 in the House and 43-2 in the Senate. And so we still have all of those people that either are embracing this issue and still continue 14 months later to embrace that issue, whether they're still running for re-election or not. So we still have those people that are out there that are political leaders, because just because you're elected to office doesn't mean that your engagement in your community stops the day that you are not an elected official anymore. So we still have quite a bit of that, because the campaign's been going on steadily for so many months, that we have some of those active elected officials, those that are candidates, and then also those that are leaving office that are supportive of what we're trying to do. So we have those layers across the political spectrum. We have a whole lot of support out there. So it's trying to figure out how do we cage this in a way so that we maintain the integrity of our nonpartisan approach. And so we do everything we possibly can to balance all of this out, because I think it's really important that Oklahomans understand that this is not something that is a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not an independent issue. It is something that impacts every single person in this state in one form or another, nearly every day. And so we want to make sure that there's always going to be a seat at the table for anybody, no matter where you lean on that spectrum, to have a voice. Unfortunately, the state, in the budget situation that we're facing right now, and also practicality too, we're not seeing policymakers step up and say, okay, we want to do an implementation plan with Marsy's law right now, because it's very difficult to have a state that is very lean invest time and effort and resources into implementation before something even is approved by the voters. So we fully expect that this coalition of people and individuals and organizations that we're pulling together will be ready when the state gets to a point when they want to have those implementation conversations. But I fully expect that, while I may not be in the room when some of these groups are pulling together, they're seeing how popular this is, and that they are already internally working on their own plans in their mind about how they're going to be involved in implementation moving forward. So I look forward to having those conversations when the time comes. But right now, I don't think it's realistic, and the same with other issues out there. You're not going to see a whole lot of people together in a room getting paid high dollars to do an analysis for implementation when the voters haven't spoken yet. But they will. It will come, and we're going to be ready.
Not to be melodramatic, but let's take, for example, things happen in elections that people don't expect, and they wake up the next morning to, oh my goodness, what do we do now? Give us an example of what kind of date would be if the apathy set in and Marsy's law didn't pass. What would Oklahoma be like for victims?
So if for some reason something happens and this doesn't work, that doesn't mean the commitment to crime victims ends right there. It's not like the Marsy's Law organization is going to say, okay, we tried, and then move on. It's not the way we work. This issue is too important It's too important. In other states, I could just point to examples in other states where they might have had a problem along the way, but then they reaffirm their commitment to actually working harder to get this done, because this is too important. This is too important. And this isn't about politics. This is about changing the day-to-day way we treat people. And we're not going to stop in our commitment to that. So while I fully believe the popularity of this issue is going to mean success for us, in my heart of hearts, I know that we're going to be successful on the backside of this. At the same time, I know that we're going to be successful because we are true to this commitment to helping crime victims. So that's where I fall back on this.
My sense would be, absent a anti-group, that apathy could be your biggest enemy. And so what would you say to folks who, yes, I understand this and I really support this concept? What would you say to motivate people to make sure that the unthinkable doesn't happen?
So all I do is point back to what just happened on the primary election. So who showed up to vote June 26th? A whole lot more people showed up to vote on June 26th than a lot of people ever anticipated. And I fully believe that Oklahoma voters are pretty jazzed up, and that we're still going to see a rising number or a steadily increased number of people that are going to show up and vote in November. That makes me super excited about what we're doing. The more people we can get engaged in this state, the more people that can turn out and vote, the more across the board Oklahoma's going to improve. We need people to step out. We need people to go vote in November. We need people to do every tool available, vote early, do your absentee voting. Do whatever it takes. But keeping the momentum going and getting more people engaged in this process, I think, is key to any issue, whether it's a crime victim issue or another issue on the ballot. So I'm pretty excited about that. And so I think we're learning a lot, as in a lot of other campaigns that are out there, learned a lot from seeing who actually turned out on June 26th. And so we're trying to look at that and really kind of figure out, where is the potential here? So I am not intimidated by much. I see opportunities and potential that's out there, and I'm just really excited about the opportunity to engage new people and get new people interested in this issue as we move forward.
So a person on the other end, our listener hears, all right, I'm sold. Now, what do you want me to do as a person who understands what the concept is, understands what the challenge is, what needs to be done? Now what do I do? And how do they find you?
So you can go to our website at Marsy's Law 4 OK, or just Google us, Marsy's Law for Oklahoma, and you can find a bunch of information on there. I've got 14,000 followers on social media. I would love many, many more. So, it's super easy to find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find us information. You can find us and information. I want to hear from people. I want to hear directly from people and talk to people, because that's what our team does every day. Talk to individuals about how crime has impacted them and why they feel like we can do more to help people. I think it's Oklahomans' natural instinct to try to want to do more to help people, and so I'm always looking for that opportunity. So I want them to call me. You can find my telephone number on our website. I want them to engage with us on social media and talk to our folks that help me with that. Go to the website, put your name and information in there, and then you'll hear back from us, because that's what we do all day long. So I'm looking for those opportunities. Most importantly, though, I want to talk to more crime victims and survivors that are out there, because I think there's still some room out there for the conversation for people that have been impacted by crime in different ways. So I'm always looking to talk to more people about that. So if you go to our website or social media and just say, hey, this happened to me and I want to talk to somebody, then I'm the one who calls you back. So that's what I'm looking for. Finally, we got to vote. We all have to step up, and we all need to get out there. And so take every opportunity you can to make sure that you're educated and you vote yes on State Question 794.
Kim Moyer with Marsy's Law. Thanks for being a sponsor of the program about victims, because as we move forward into this and people re-engage, especially when we get out of the summer doldrums and the campaign begins, we want to spend a lot of time talking with you folks, finding out what's going on, especially if issues start to emerge. And best of luck with everything you're doing.
Well, thank you, Scott. And Forgotten Voices is this great opportunity to have these ongoing conversations, because there are so many people out there impacted by crime or that are trying to fight to help crime victims. And so I think capturing that conversation is important, and that's why we're so supportive of Forgotten Voices, and why we think that this is a really important step in educating the community about what we can do better to help crime victims across the state.
It has nothing to do with medical marijuana or Russians. There are other issues out there.
Breath of fresh air. We don't have to talk about any of that. We're just going to talk about how to help people.
To my friends in the media, there are other issues, and I put a whole tab about medical marijuana on my website, but nonetheless, this is deadly serious. The people that I've met in talking to victims, they're just forgotten. In many cases, they're forgotten, and even their advocates feel that sense of abandonment sometimes by public policy and government. And I think this is a great opportunity. You've got a great team, by the way. I will say this: you have a great team of people on this campaign, and golly, we couldn't wish you more luck than, well, we wish you lots of luck. Let's just put it that way.
Thank you, and I'll tell everybody that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Kim Moyer with Marsy's Law, and this will not be the last time we'll be talking to her. Thanks for listening. You're listening to the new media, the Mitchell Talks Network. Learn more at MitchellTalks.com and follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks.